I told you, your hands are not worthy to touch me. Go away. Don't ruin our happy day.
I am your mother. Look, what did your wife just do to me? You should go home. There are only people of class here.
And remember, what my wife says is law.
Charleston, South Carolina. A June afternoon bathed the city in molten sunlight, warm and honey-thick. Beyond the rolling hills, Marlowe Vineyard gleamed like a kingdom of glass. Rows of emerald vines shimmered beneath the violin's music, the air steeped in the sweetness of ripe grapes and magnolia blossoms. From afar, guests drifted between the arches of light women in flowing silk gowns, men in black tuxedos, their laughter soft as champagne bubbles. At the heart of it all stood Evelyn Marlowe, once known throughout Southern finance as the Queen of Glass and Gold. She was poised by the ivy-covered balcony, a flute of champagne balanced between slender fingers. Her smile was the kind that disarmed and deflected, practiced, serene, fragile as morning mist. Under the waning sun, her silver hair glowed, catching the light like threads spun by time itself. Today was meant to be joy incarnate, the wedding of her only son, Lucas Marlowe, heir to the family's vast wine empire. His bride, Sienna Hart, a social media icon with millions of followers, had arrived in Charleston like a comet of beauty and ambition. People whispered about her charm, her calculated warmth, her hunger for perfection. Evelyn had smiled through it all. She wanted, more than anything, to believe her son had found happiness. When the first chords of the wedding march unfurled through the garden, Evelyn clapped gently, eyes soft with pride. "My son," she murmured under her breath. Her gold-ringed hand trembled slightly, though her smile did not falter. Behind the luminous facade, something darker, a thin veil of sorrow, clung to her like shadow. The ceremony unfolded with cinematic precision: cream roses, white ribbons, crystal goblets reflecting candlelight. Every movement shimmered with curated perfection. People said Marlowe Vineyard had never looked more divine, but as Evelyn watched the glittering celebration, she felt an odd stillness beneath. In the music, a draft of cold air in a room too beautiful to breathe in. When the bride appeared, descending the staircase in a gown crusted with crystals, she was dazzling enough to make the crowd gasp. Yet, when she passed Evelyn, something in her smile chilled the blood. "You look magnificent, Sienna," Evelyn said softly, touching her arm with polite grace. Sienna's lips curved. "Thank you, Mrs. Marlowe," she replied, each syllable deliberate. "I just hope everything goes exactly my way today." It was a single line, quiet, silk-smooth, but sharp enough to slice the air. Evelyn's pulse quickened. She told herself she'd imagined the venom. The night pressed on. Music, laughter, the gentle clink of glasses. Lucas and Sienna glided beneath golden lights, flawless as a vogue spread. Evelyn sat nearby, pride swelling like the sea, yet beneath it a tide of exhaustion pulled at her heart. Her fingers found the gold locket at her throat, a gift from her late husband, Richard, gone 10 years now. For a fleeting second, she could almost hear his voice in the wind whispering, "Evie, power doesn't come from domination, it comes from respect." She shut her eyes, letting the words steady her. One tear thin, invisible, trembled but did not fall. Then it happened, sudden, sharp, merciless. As Sienna raised her champagne glass for a toast, Evelyn, in a gentle impulse, stepped forward to refill it. A second's distraction, the glass slipped. Champagne spilled, golden and gleaming, across the white gown. Time stopped. The jazz band faltered. Laughter snapped off mid-note. Sienna stared down at the spreading stain, then up, her eyes alight with fury. "For God's sake, Evelyn," Lucas blurted, stepping toward them. But before he could say more, Sienna's hand struck. The slap cracked through the ballroom like lightning splitting marble. Gasps rippled through the hall. Crystal glasses shook. A bead of wine slid down. Evelyn's cheek glinting under the chandelier like a tear of gold. "Next time," Sienna hissed, her voice slicing the silence, "keep your wrinkled hands off me, old witch." A few guests gasped, others froze. Someone let out a nervous laugh that died instantly. Lucas stood rigid, jaw tight, shame pooling in his eyes. Then, forcing a brittle smile, he murmured, "Mom, please. Don't ruin this night. Just go clean up." Those words "don't ruin this" pierced deeper than the slap. Evelyn stood motionless, her ears ringing. The violin struck up again, faltering, as if unsure how to play through open wounds. She didn't cry, didn't shout. She simply turned, each step measured, walking past 100 staring faces. Her gown brushed the marble floor, trailing streaks of golden champagne that gleamed like blood on stone. Outside, fireworks burst over Charleston, white and gold raining across the night sky. The reflections caught on Evelyn's face, two tiny lights, one of wine, one of tears. Inside her mind, only one phrase echoed, metallic and merciless, "Don't ruin this." It clanged like a chain tightening around her heart. When the car finally pulled away from Marlowe Vineyard, Evelyn leaned her head back against the seat. The rain had begun, drumming against the glass roof in steady rhythm. In the window's reflection, she saw herself a mother, a queen, and now a woman publicly executed before her kingdom. Her hands trembled, her heart burned, yet her eyes remained dry. Something within her cracked, then cooled, hardening into steel. She whispered into the storm, her voice low, fierce as the wind. "They forgot who built this empire." And as the iron gates of Marlowe Vineyard closed behind her, thunder rolled above, the sky breaking open. Evelyn Marlowe knew, with absolute clarity, that the play of kindness was over and the next act had just begun. That sound crack split the night like thunder tearing through a ballroom of glass. The echo ricocheted off marble walls, slicing through laughter, through the violins, through every glittering fragment of the perfect wedding that Evelyn Marlowe had built with her own hands. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the champagne flute fell from Evelyn's hand and shattered against the marble floor, wine spreading in golden veins that gleamed like blood beneath the chandelier. Her arm hung frozen midair, trembling as silence swelled, thick and unbearable. 300 people, 300 stares. Some lowered their eyes out of awkwardness. Some turned away, pretending not to see. And the rest they watched, wide-eyed, hungry for scandal, fascinated by the ruin of a queen. "Mom," Lucas's voice broke the stillness, strained, embarrassed, already apologetic. "Please, don't ruin this night." The words were soft, almost kind, yet they struck harder than Sienna's hand. Evelyn's fingers found her cheek. It burned like open flame. When she pulled her hand back, her fingertips were wet, she didn't know whether from wine or tears. Above her, the chandeliers still glimmered, but their light had turned merciless. It revealed everything, every line of age, every weakness, every fracture of the mask she'd worn for years. Sienna Hart stood poised like an actress beneath a spotlight, her voice slicing through the silence. "Next time, keep your wrinkled hands off me, old witch." The cruelty in it was too deliberate to be impulsive. A faint laugh muffled, nervous rose from a distant corner. Evelyn heard it clearly. Every note cut her like glass. She turned to her son. "Lucas." Just one word, but it carried every plea a mother could make without collapsing. He couldn't meet her gaze. One hand rested on his wife's shoulder. The other poured himself another drink. "Please, Mom," he murmured again. "Let's not make a scene. Let's not make a scene." 3 words, soft, polite, deadly. The music was gone. So was the air. The world shrank to the sound of her own heartbeat, slow, uneven, breaking apart. The lights above glowed gold, cruel and bright, as if illuminating an execution. Evelyn stood in the center of it, a woman stripped bare before her kingdom. A tear slid down her cheek, catching the crystal light, turning into something almost beautiful. But she didn't speak. She didn't weep. Instead, she bent down calm, deliberate, and picked up a shard of the broken glass. Her hands shook, but she placed it neatly on a passing waiter's tray. That single gesture froze the room. It was so quiet that even the candles seemed to hesitate. There was something in her eyes, a silence not born of shame, but of something far colder, resolve. Without a word, she turned and walked away. Her gown brushed across the marble, sweeping the spilled champagne like trails of dried blood. A waiter rushed to open the door. As she stepped through it, the wind caught the warped echo of the jazz band, the music resuming faintly, as if nothing had happened. Outside, Charleston's sky was painted in violet and gold. Fireworks burst above the vineyard, showering the horizon with light. Behind her, the laughter and applause resumed the show, continuing without its architect. Evelyn paused on the veranda. The night smelled of wine, salt, and magnolia. For a moment, she thought she might faint, not from shame, but from the sheer weight of stillness pressing on her chest. A young attendant appeared, face pale with sympathy. "Mrs. Marlowe, are you all right?" She smiled, a small, perfect smile, too calm to be real. "I'm fine," she said softly. "I just need a little air." Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes were made of glass. In them, the young man saw something that chilled him, not humiliation, but a flash of cold light, the kind that comes from metal, not tears. Evelyn turned away, her heels clicking against the stone path as she walked toward her car. Fireworks boomed behind her, heart-shaped bursts spelling, "Forever Love, Sienna and Lucas." The irony glowed bright against the night sky. Through the car window, she watched the vineyard shrink behind her, all gold and fire and noise. In the reflection of the glass, her own face stared back, pale, streaked with the faintest shimmer of champagne. "Forever, huh?" she whispered. "We'll see about that." A gust of wind swept through the fields, carrying the scent of burnt powder, magnolia, and spilled wine. Evelyn's car rolled slowly down the rain-slicked road, tires hissing against the pavement. She closed her eyes. On her cheek, the golden stain had dried, a glimmering trace of what the world had just done to her. Not a bruise, not a wound, but a scar. A scar that shone like gold, cruel and permanent. Inside her, something quiet unfurled, not anger, not sorrow, but the birth of something colder. She had been humiliated before hundreds, betrayed by the one person she had given everything to. And yet, somewhere in that hollow ache, a seed of purpose began to take root. She whispered into the dark, her voice steady now, carried away by the wind. "They'll remember who I am." Behind her, Charleston's celebration roared on, deaf and blind. Ahead of her, the road stretched long and wet beneath the storm clouds. And in that space between humiliation and vengeance, Evelyn Marlowe was reborn. Humiliated before hundreds, betrayed by her own son, what would you have done? Comment 2 if you would rise and fight for your honor. Comment 3 if you would stay silent and let time deliver your answer. Charleston did not sleep that night. The wind from the Ashley River drifted through the magnolia trees, stirring the garden lights until they swayed like restless ghosts. Far across the hills, Marlowe Vineyard still blazed with music and laughter. Champagne flowed, violins played, guests danced as if nothing had happened. As if the Queen of Marlowe herself hadn't been humiliated under their jeweled chandeliers. But at the end of the tree-lined road, where the white stone mansion stood silent as a tomb, the night held its breath. Evelyn Marlowe stepped inside. The click of her heels on the polished oak floor echoed like the uneven beat of a fractured heart. No one greeted her. No servants, no lights, no warmth. The house was too large, too empty. Every sigh she released came back to her, sharp and mocking, as if the walls themselves were laughing. Everything was as it had been that morning. Italian landscapes framed in gold, the crystal wine cabinet gleaming under soft lamplight. And above the marble fireplace, Richard Marlowe, immortalized in a photograph, his smile still gentle, still proud, his eyes fixed forward as though watching from another world. Evelyn approached, resting her trembling hand on the frame. "You see this, Richard?" she whispered, voice raw. "Our son laughed when I was slapped in front of 300 people." Her voice broke, catching in her throat. Then she let out a short, bitter laugh, the kind that comes from wounds too deep to scream. "And your darling daughter-in-law," she added. "She called me an old witch." In front of them all. A single tear slid down the glass, tracing the outline of his face, a ghost of grief she didn't bother to wipe away. Her hand clenched tighter around the frame until her knuckles whitened. "You used to say," she murmured, "strength isn't in striking back, but in knowing when to let go." Her eyes glistened in the candlelight, sharp as broken mirrors. "But, you know what, Richard? Tonight I let go and they tore me apart for it." She turned, uncorking a bottle of Marlowe Vintage 2015, the same wine she and Richard had aged together long ago, back when love still felt like safety. The cork popped softly, like a sigh. She poured a glass and drank once, twice, again. The taste was full, rich, sweet at first, then dark and bitter. Memory, bottled and fermented. When the bottle was half gone, Evelyn stumbled to her feet. The wine sloshed over the rim, streaming across the wood like liquid sunlight. The lamps caught the spill, turning it into veins of gold or, perhaps, veins of blood. She stared down, eyes distant. "My blood," she said quietly. "The blood of the woman who built it all, poured out, wasted, like a broken glass." Then, without warning, she hurled the goblet across the room. Crash! The sound splintered through the silence, echoing through every empty corridor of that grand, hollow house. No one came, no footsteps, no voices. Only the night wind answered, whispering through the curtains, teasing the candle flame until it flickered in fear, as if even the fire pitied her. Evelyn sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. In her mind, the night replayed again and again, the slap, the laughter, her son's voice, "Mom, don't ruin this." A strangled laugh escaped her lips, wet and sharp. "Ruin what, Lucas?" she whispered. "The party? The illusion that we're still perfect?" Anger burned beneath her skin, not wild but slow molten, steady, unstoppable. And from somewhere deep within her memory, Richard's voice returned, calm and unyielding. "Evie, if the day ever comes when people forget what you've done for them, don't reclaim it with noise. Reclaim it with a silence that terrifies them. A silence that terrifies them." She repeated the phrase under her breath, like a prayer, like a vow. Then she inhaled deeply, the sound of rain growing louder above her head. At first it came as gentle taps on the glass roof. Then harder, heavier, until the city outside vanished behind a curtain of storm. Evelyn walked to the window and pulled the drapes wide. Charleston shimmered beneath the silver rain, the streets blurred, the lights bleeding gold into the darkness. In the distance, the final fireworks of the wedding exploded, their red glow washing across her face, a face carved in exhaustion, carved in marble. "Forever love," the fiery letters spelled across the sky, then dissolved into smoke. Evelyn whispered, "Forever's over." She turned away from the window, poured the last of the wine into her glass. This time, she didn't drink. She stared into it instead, into that shimmering gold surface where she saw herself reflected, a woman who had loved too much, forgiven too long, and been destroyed by the very softness that once made her human. She set the glass down, quietly. Lightning flashed outside, its glare catching her eyes dry now, burning with resolve. She crossed the room to her desk and pulled open a drawer. Inside lay a landline phone, a few thick folders of financial records, and a silver business card engraved in neat serif letters. 𝐷𝐞𝐯𝐞, Private Financial Counsel. Her hand hovered over it. She didn't pick it up. Not yet. But the moment her fingers brushed the cool metal, the air in the room shifted. The silence no longer mourned, it waited. The rain intensified. Lightning blazed again, illuminating the room for one brief second. A sudden gust blew through the window, knocking over Richard's photograph. It hit the floor with a shattering crack. The glass split across a smile, dividing it neatly in two. Evelyn knelt to pick it up. A shard sliced her fingertip. A bead of blood bloomed bright and red. She didn't wince. She simply smiled, thin, deliberate, dangerous. "You always believed in kindness, Richard," she whispered. "But kindness to those who don't deserve it is suicide." Thunder rolled outside, deep and final. Evelyn rose, her gaze settling on the phone once more. A thought formed, sharp, clean, irreversible. And in that moment, something within her changed. The woman who had been humiliated, forgotten, betrayed died. The one who remained, Evelyn Marlowe, the architect of reckoning, awakened. She closed the curtains, turned off the lights, and let the house fall into darkness. Outside, the storm roared on. Inside, only a single flash of lightning caught the fractured photograph, one half bathed in light, the other swallowed by shadow. Rain lashed against the windows, relentless, furious, as if Charleston itself were mourning. The city lay drowned in darkness, broken only by white veins of lightning slicing the sky like silver blades. Every crash of thunder rattled the glass roof above the Marlowe mansion. Inside, the clock in the living room struck 12. 1, 2, 3. Each chime heavy, deliberate, echoing through the corridors like the tolling of judgment. Evelyn Marlowe sat alone in her study. The lamplight, soft and gold, painted her face in halves, one angel, one executioner. Before her lay the debris of a lifetime, an empty wine bottle, a cracked photograph of her husband, and a black rotary phone whose silver coil gleamed like a serpent waiting to strike. Outside, the storm's rhythm became a drumbeat, a herald of something inevitable. Evelyn's gaze drifted to the silver business card resting on her desk. 𝐷𝐞𝐯𝐞, Private Financial Counsel. Beneath the name, 3 engraved words glimmered faintly in the light: discretion, precision, loyalty, 3 virtues she had once lived by. 3 pillars upon which the Marlowe empire had been built. And now, they would serve her again, not to preserve, but to destroy. Her hand hovered over the receiver. For a moment, she simply listened to the rain, to the thunder, to her own steady breathing. Then, slowly, she lifted the phone. The dial tone hummed long, low, eternal. Then 3 rings. On the 4th, a voice emerged, rough with sleep. "Mrs. Marlowe? It's me, Caleb. What's going on at this hour?" Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her eyes glinting like the storm outside. Her voice came soft, level, but beneath it, something cold and sharp hummed like electricity. "Caleb, I need you to do something. Right now." The rain grew louder, drumming harder, syncing with her pulse. "Cut everything," she said. "The penthouse in Miami, both cars, all credit and expense accounts. Revoke Lucas's shares in Marlowe Estates. Lock every access point by 8 a.m. No delays. No negotiations." There was silence, only the faint hiss of the storm through the receiver. When Caleb finally spoke, his voice was quiet, cautious. "Are you certain, Evelyn? That's your son we're talking about." Her lips curved a small, bitter crescent of irony. "No, Caleb," she said softly. "My son died tonight. I'm only cutting the cord to what's left of him." For a long time, nothing but static filled the line. Then Caleb exhaled. When he spoke again, his tone had changed, steadier, deferential. "I understand. I'll begin the transfers at dawn. Would you like me to?" Warn him first? No. The words sliced clean through the air. No warnings. No explanations. He hesitated, then asked, "And Mrs. Hart?" "Her too." "Cut her off entirely. Every linked account, every supplemental card. If she tries to spend a cent tonight, decline it." Her voice slowed, deepened, every syllable deliberate. "Caleb, I want them to feel it. The free fall. The silence. The moment they realize that the world they lived in was built on my breath and that I've stopped breathing for them." On the other end of the line, the faint clatter of keystrokes began, sharp, rhythmic, final. Evelyn sat motionless, eyes half closed, listening to it. Each click sounded like the hammering of nails sealing a coffin. The rain beat against the windows harder now, 1,000 fists demanding entry. The old grandfather clock ticked in the distance, a slow countdown to dawn. At last, Caleb's voice returned. "It's done. Everything will lock at 8. They'll wake up to declined cards, frozen assets, revoked access. They won't know what hit them." Evelyn nodded slowly, though he could not see her. "Good," she whispered. "Thank you, Caleb. You've always been loyal." He hesitated once more, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Evelyn, forgive me for saying this, but are you sure you want to go this far?" Her eyes flicked toward the cracked photograph on her desk. Richard's smile split down the middle. She reached out, tracing the broken glass with her fingertip. "I'm not going far, Caleb," she said quietly. "I'm only reclaiming what's mine. Kindness isn't an obligation, it's a privilege. And they've lost it." Click. The line went dead. The room exhaled, filled only with the steady roar of the rain and the distant sigh of wind weaving through the halls. Evelyn leaned back, eyes closing. No tears came, no grief remained. Only stillness, the stillness of power reborn. She rose and walked into the hallway. Her shadow stretched long across the wooden floor, merging with the flicker of lightning from the window. Along the corridor hung the painted faces of generations stern Marlowe ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow her. Evelyn paused before one portrait, her father's, the founder of everything. The man who once built his first vineyard from nothing but soil and defiance. "I kept my promise, Father," she murmured. "I didn't let anyone kill your legacy, not even the child I gave life to." Thunder cracked like applause. She opened the window, letting the night air rush in. It smelled of rain and wet oak, of the raw pulse of the earth. In the distance, Charleston shimmered faintly, skyscraper lights reflected in the dark curve of the river. Evelyn looked down at her palm. The thin cut from the broken glass was still there, a red line against her pale skin. She lifted her finger and smiled, soft and dangerous. "My justice," she whispered, "needs no knife. Just one call." The clock read 12:47 a.m. A gust of wind swept through the room, tearing the curtains loose. They billowed like wings behind her, casting shifting shadows on the walls. On the desk, the lamp still burned, its light reflecting off the last drop of wine, glowing like molten gold. Evelyn sat again, facing the storm. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the window, part woman, part ghost. She knew that when the sun rose, an entire world would collapse. Quietly, neatly, legally. And somewhere within that gray dawn, the woman who had been slapped, mocked, and abandoned would reclaim her crown. Not through fury, but through silence. By the time the last thunder rolled away, Charleston slept peacefully, unaware. Two people, hundreds of miles away, would soon wake to find their world erased. Evelyn closed her eyes, resting her head against the chair. On her lips formed a whisper, equal parts prayer and decree. Let justice taste like silence. A mother can end her child's kingdom with a single call. Is that cruelty or clarity? Comment 4 if you believe sometimes you must cut away a part to save the rest. Comment 5 if you believe true love never lets go. Morning broke over Charleston in sheets of soft sunlight. The bay shimmered calm and bright, its surface smooth as glass, as if the world itself had forgotten last night's storm. But far away, in a luxury penthouse in Miami, another kind of tempest had just begun. Sienna's heart woke to the hum of her phone vibrating violently on the nightstand. She blinked, groaned, and reached for it and froze. The screen was a battlefield of alerts and red warnings. Transaction declined. Account temporarily suspended. Payment failure. Please contact your provider. Line after line, the same words, multiplying. "What the hell?" she muttered, tossing the phone aside and grabbing her laptop. The cold glow of the screen reflected on her pale face as she typed frantically. A few clicks later, the bank page loaded and then flashed blue. Account frozen, pending internal investigation. Her stomach dropped. The air around her seemed to thin. "Lucas!" she shouted, panic sharp in her throat. "Wake up, my cards are all frozen." From the bathroom, Lucas Marlowe emerged, towel slung around his waist, hair dripping. He rubbed his temple, his voice thick with sleep. "It's probably a glitch," he said, forcing calm. "I'll call the bank." He dialed the number, pacing the room as he waited. The automated voice that answered was polite, detached, almost surgical. "We're sorry. Your accounts have been temporarily suspended by order of the Marlowe Estates Ownership Office. For further inquiries, please contact your legal representative." Lucas stopped breathing. "Marlowe Estates?" he repeated. "That's impossible." Sienna snatched the phone from his hand. "Your mother?" she hissed. "She did this?" Lucas said nothing. He was already pulling on his clothes, grabbing his car keys like a man clinging to control. "I'll call her," he muttered. "She can't," but when they reached the garage, they stopped cold. The space where the white Tesla Model X had been was empty. On the spotless floor, a small white tag read, "Property repossessed. Contract terminated." Sienna stared at it, her voice breaking. No, that's not possible. I bought that car." Lucas swallowed hard. "No, it was leased under the company's account." Her face drained of color. "You told me it was yours." He snapped. "This isn't the time, Sienna. I didn't know she'd do this." 2 hours later, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. Banks, corporate offices, property managers. Each voice sounded the same kind, cold, final. "Your account has been terminated. The apartment is company-owned. It will be sealed within 24 hours. Your employment contract has been nullified. All access revoked." Lucas sank into the couch, his face buried in his hands. Around him, the penthouse that once glowed with marble and glass now felt like a mausoleum. Sienna stood by the window, sunlight fracturing across her reflection. "She actually did it," she whispered. "One call, and everything's gone." By afternoon, desperation turned to disbelief. They tried withdrawing cash, declined. Every card disabled, every joint account frozen, every lease, every corporate tie erased. Their phones fell silent. No more calls from friends, no messages from business partners. The assistants who once answered in seconds were gone. In Charleston's elite circles, the whispers spread faster than smoke. "The Marlowe boys' accounts are frozen." His mother pulled the plug. By evening, it was gossip over every brunch and whispered through every silk curtain. And in their world, once you lost money, you lost meaning. By the second night, the penthouse fridge was nearly empty. Sienna huddled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of perfume and panic. The silence was unbearable. Once she'd been surrounded by flowers, luxury, gifts, endless attention. Now there was nothing but the hum of a dying refrigerator. Lucas stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the Miami skyline flicker. The lights were dazzling, but inside him, there was only dust. "I'm going to call her," he said, his voice hoarse. "Don't," Sienna snapped. "You're going to beg her." He turned, eyes hollow. "And what about you? How do you plan to live when there's nothing left? She laughed, a sharp, metallic sound. You think I was here for you, Lucas? No. I was here for the name. The empire your mother built. Without her, you're nobody. Her words hit harder than any slap. 3 days later, dawn crept into the penthouse like grief. Sienna emerged from the bedroom, suitcase in hand, her face untouched by tears. She placed an envelope on the glass table, divorce papers. Sign it, she said flatly. I don't have time for tragedy. Then she turned and left without a glance back. Lucas called after her, voice breaking. Sienna, I didn't. The door closed. The sound was dry, final. The end of a golden fairy tale. He stood in the silence she left behind. Morning light streamed through the tall windows, catching the fine dust floating in the air. The couch, the glass tables, the art on the walls, all relics of a kingdom already dead. On the coffee table lay bills, foreclosure notices, bank letters stacked like ashes of a life once gilded. Lucas sat down, shaking, and opened his laptop. He tried to log into his corporate email. The screen blinked gray. Access denied. Then, a single line of text, your authorization has been revoked by order of the board. He let out a hollow laugh, half sob, half madness. She really did it, he whispered. She erased me. Back in Charleston, rain began to fall again, soft, rhythmic, cleansing. High above the river, in the glass tower of Marlowe Estates, Evelyn Marlowe sat in her office. Through the deafening window, the Ashley River shimmered beneath the silver sky. On her desk, a cup of black tea, steam curling upward, and a folder of financial statements neatly arranged. Her phone buzzed, Lucas Marlowe calling. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, quietly, she turned it face down and silenced it. Outside, the rain tapped gently on the glass, steady as a heartbeat, the heartbeat of a woman who no longer bled. Evelyn whispered to the empty room, Now you'll learn, my son, what gold is worth when it turns to dust. And somewhere, far away, a broken man finally understood that truth. 3 weeks after the financial collapse, the second storm began. Not in boardrooms, not in banks, but in the one battlefield no fortune could control: the internet. On a humid Monday morning, Evelyn Marlowe was reviewing personnel reports when her assistant knocked on the office door. The young woman's face was pale, lips pressed tight. You should see this, she said, setting an iPad on the polished oak desk. Evelyn adjusted her glasses, glanced down, and froze. On the screen, a video. Living with a controlling mother-in-law, the untold story of Sienna Hart Marlowe. The thumbnail showed Sienna, tousled hair, swollen eyes, seated in a small, dim apartment. A soft piano melody played beneath her quivering voice. She controlled everything, Sienna said tearfully. I wasn't allowed to spend my own money or love the way I wanted. She destroyed our marriage. She ruined my husband's life. She took everything from us. The 6-minute video was artfully cut, cinematic lighting, emotional pacing. Interlaced clips from the Marlowe wedding flashed across the screen. The vineyard, the chandeliers, Evelyn's stoic expression mid-toast. The infamous slap from that night was blurred. Instead, the editing darkened Evelyn's face, turning her into the perfect villain. Below, the comments poured in like venom. Rich moms think they own their kids. She's terrifying. I believe Sienna. Cancel Evelyn Marlowe. In less than 24 hours, the video hit 12 million views. The tabloids caught fire. From Queen of Glass to Queen of Control. The wine empire heiress who ruined her own son. The headlines multiplied, each one louder, uglier, more merciless. By noon, her phone was vibrating nonstop. Reporters, shareholders, PR firms, friends too frightened to speak plainly. By evening, her silence had become proof of guilt. For 3 days, Evelyn said nothing. No posts, no statements, no defenses. Her staff fidgeted in whispers. 𝐤𝐦𝐢𝐥𝐲, her financial advisor, finally stepped into her office and placed the New York Post on her desk. Across the front page, a photo of Evelyn, mid-step, hair silver, eyes hard, lips pressed, and below it, the headline screamed, "The Witch of Charleston." Caleb folded his arms. "You can't stay silent forever," he warned gently. "They're rewriting your story, Evelyn. And if you don't speak, their version becomes the truth." Evelyn looked up from the paper, her gaze steady. Outside, the evening sun bled crimson over the Ashley River, painting the glass walls with fire. Her voice was calm, almost detached. "Let them talk," she said. "The more they speak, the more they reveal themselves. I just need one opportunity, one moment to speak mine." The moment arrived sooner than expected. Friday afternoon, the office phone rang. Her assistant's voice trembled as she handed it over. "Someone from the Atlantic, ma'am." Evelyn took the call. The voice on the other end was clear, warm, professional. "Mrs. Marlowe, my name is Harper Vale. I've followed your story closely. I don't want it twisted by gossip. Would you be willing to tell your truth just once?" There was a pause. The rain outside began to fall, slow and deliberate, like the ticking of time. Evelyn closed her eyes. Then she said, softly, "Once is enough." 2 days later, she flew to Manhattan. The studio was bare gray backdrop, soft lighting. No makeup team, no glamour, just 2 women sitting across from each other. One a journalist, the other a mother the world had decided to burn. The camera light blinked red. Harper spoke first. "Mrs. Marlowe, your former daughter-in-law claims you destroyed her marriage and her life. What do you have to say to her?" Evelyn sat straight, her hands calmly folded. The light glinted across her silver hair, forming a faint halo. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, resonant, unhurried, every syllable deliberate. "I didn't destroy anyone's life," she said. "I simply stopped funding their illusions." The room went still. Even the sound crew held their breath. "I gave them everything," she continued, her tone neither bitter nor boastful, merely factual. "Homes, cars, status, comfort. But no one taught them to stand on their own. When I withdrew my hand, they fell, and somehow that made me the villain." Her eyes lifted slightly, sharp and clear as glass. "Perhaps, to them, love means payment." Harper hesitated, then, in a quiet voice, asked, "Do you regret it?" Evelyn turned her gaze directly into the camera lens. There were no tears, only the depth of a woman who had lived too long in the fire and learned to stop flinching. "If love means letting someone destroy themselves," she said, "then no. I don't regret it. I lost a son, but I also lost the illusion that money can save a soul." Then she leaned forward, her last words steady and soft, the kind that echo long after sound fades. "Here's the truth: sometimes, love means letting them fall." A week later, The Atlantic published the interview. The headline burned across every platform: "The woman who took everything back." The response was immediate and divided. "She's right. Boundaries are love." Finally, someone speaks for parents. "She didn't destroy them, they destroyed themselves." The tide had turned. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the mob began to fall silent. Sienna's video vanished overnight. Her account was suspended for spreading false and defamatory content. The world that had once worshipped her now turned its back. Back in Charleston, the rain fell steady and silver. Evelyn returned to her office, setting her umbrella by the door. Her assistant greeted her with a nervous smile. "The public's on your side again, Mrs. Marlowe." Evelyn only nodded. "Don't call it support," she said softly. "It's just truth, finding its way home." That night, Charleston slept under rain and quiet. Evelyn stood by the window, glass of white wine in hand, her own vineyard's harvest. The city lights shimmered through the droplets, golden and distant. Victory had no trumpet, no applause. Only the stillness after the storm, and in that stillness, Evelyn felt something unexpected: not triumph, but ache. Justice had prevailed. Her name was restored. Yet, as the wine touched her lips, she tasted loneliness subtle, inescapable. Her eyes wandered to Richard's photograph on the wall. "Do you see it, Richard?" she whispered. "I took it all back, and yet my heart feels emptier than ever." The wind stirred the curtains, cool and fragrant with rain. Her reflection trembled faintly in the glass older, smaller but unbroken. Justice, she thought, might be real, but it would never fill the silence of a mother's heart. When the world believes a lie, what would you do to defend your truth? Comment 6 if you'd fight back and speak your truth. Comment 7 if you'd stay silent and let the truth find its own way home. December. Winter laid a thin veil of mist over Charleston, wrapping the city in a kind of quiet sleep. On Evelyn Marlowe's desk, the framed article, "The Woman Who Took Everything Back," still stood not as a trophy, but as evidence. She had reclaimed her honor. She had paid the price for justice. But since then, the phone had stopped ringing. No messages, no calls, especially not from Lucas. The boy once hailed across Charleston as the heir of Marlowe had vanished from the map of high society. All anyone heard were rumors, nights spent drinking in Atlanta bars, kicked out of hotels for unpaid bills, sleeping in a rented apartment near an industrial park. Evelyn heard it from Caleb Raines. He placed a folder on her desk, voice grave. "Lucas has emptied his personal savings. He's not well. He's falling fast." Evelyn nodded, but her eyes drifted toward the window. "He has to learn, Caleb. I sheltered him too long. I made him this way." Her voice tried to sound firm, but it wavered at the end. That night, Evelyn sat alone in the living room, a glass of white wine in hand. Outside, cold wind swept through the magnolia trees, whispering through the cracks of the door. On the table lay an old photograph, Lucas, at 10 years old, smiling, holding his first science trophy. Beside him stood a younger Evelyn, proud, radiant. She ran her hand over his face in the picture. "Lucas, you used to shine like the sun," she whispered. "When did you forget who you were?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. 3 days later, with the season's first snow dusting the streets of Charleston, the phone rang at 2:17 a.m. Evelyn jolted awake. A distant male voice came through. "Is this Mrs. Evelyn Marlowe?" "Yes, it is. This is the on-call physician at Grady Hospital in Atlanta. We have a patient named Lucas Marlowe. He was admitted for an overdose combined with alcohol." Evelyn gripped the receiver. The world around her seemed to explode in silence. "Is he alive?" "For now, yes. We've stabilized him, but his mental state is very fragile. You should come immediately." She said nothing. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then a faint sob broke from her lips, small, but sharp enough to pierce the night. For the first time in months, Evelyn Marlowe cried. The earliest flight from Charleston left at 5 a.m. She sat in the front row, face pale, eyes swollen. Her phone still displayed the wallpaper, Lucas as a child. Each roar of the engines made her grip the armrest tighter, as if holding onto something that might dissolve. Her mind replayed the vineyard night, the slap, the laughter, the cold decisions that followed, the account closures, the interviews, the words she had spoken herself. "I'm only cutting ties with what's left of him." Now that sentence returned, a blade twisting inward. Grady Hospital, Atlanta, 6:47 a.m. Evelyn entered room 214. The air felt heavy, almost metallic. Lucas lay motionless on the bed, breathing tube at his nose, skin pale as wax. The monitor pulsed steadily, weak but steady. Evelyn approached, her hand trembling as she reached for his. It was cold, dry, lifeless. "Lucas." Her voice was soft, as though afraid to disturb the silence. "Can you hear me? Don't go. Not like this." No answer. Only the steady beep, beep of the machine. She lowered her forehead onto his hand. "What have I done, my son?" A young nurse entered, adjusting the IV drip. "He'll make it if he stabilizes over the next 24 hours," she said gently. "But his depression is severe. He'll need long-term care." Evelyn nodded, murmured a hoarse thank you. When the door closed again, she stayed beside him, eyes fixed on his face. The first light of dawn slipped through the blinds, touching Lucas's face, pale, thin, yet still carrying traces of the boy he once was. Evelyn stroked his hair with trembling fingers. "I taught you how to win," she whispered, "but never how to lose. That was my mistake." A tear fell onto his hand. This time, she didn't wipe it away. That afternoon, Lucas stirred. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then finding her. "Mom?" His voice was cracked, dry. Evelyn rose, clasping his hand. "Yes, it's me. You're safe now." He gave a weak smile. Tears slid down his temple. "You won, Mom. You got everything back, and I lost everything." Evelyn shook her head, her throat tight. "No, Lucas. I lost, too. Because I forgot the only thing worth keeping." He looked at her, tired, hollow but alive. "I want to start over, Mom." Evelyn gripped his hand tighter, tears streaming freely now. "Then we start again together." Night fell. The hospital bathed in soft, sterile light. Evelyn sat in the chair beside him, eyes half closed, her hand still holding his. Outside, the wind brushed gently against the window pane. And in that quiet moment, she finally understood the lesson she had resisted all her life. Sometimes, letting the one you love fall is the only way they'll learn how to stand again. 1 year later. Asheville, North Carolina. A small mountain town nestled among the Smoky Mountains, where the morning mist drifted like the earth's own breath. Church bells chimed softly through the fog, mingling with the scent of freshly roasted coffee. Inside Blue Fern Cafe, thin wisps of steam curled up from cups of latte, fading into the golden light of dawn. Behind the counter, a young man wiped the table's dark uniform, gentle smile, hands scented with coffee. Lucas Marlowe. No suit, no silver watch, no trace of the once famous heir of Marlowe Estates. Now he was simply Lucas, a barista in a small mountain cafe, living by his own work and his reclaimed dignity. On the shelf, a few photos of staff moments were taped up. In one of them, Lucas stood among friends, laughing freely. Beside the espresso machine sat an MBA notebook, his weekend program, earned through scholarship. The bell above the door jingled. A woman stepped inside. Silver hair neatly tied, cream wool coat, low heels. Lucas didn't need to see her face to know. Evelyn Marlowe paused in the doorway, surrounded by the warmth of roasted beans and soft jazz. To the other customers, she was just another woman seeking coffee, but the morning light touching her face made her seem like someone crossing the line between past and peace. Lucas approached, his voice rough but warm. "Mom." Evelyn smiled. "You look stronger." "The coffee's good here," he said, half joking, half true. She laughed, a small, genuine sound she hadn't made in years. He guided her to a corner table by the window. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting gold over the wooden table. On the wall hung a simple painting, a mountain path leading to the summit, quiet and calm. Lucas poured a cup of coffee for his mother. The aroma drifted softly between them. Evelyn looked down at the cup, her eyes dimming slightly. "Do you hate me?" The words escaped as gently as breath, but her heart pounded hard enough to hurt. Lucas studied her for a long time. The eyes that once burned with pride and anger were now clear, calm as an autumn lake. He smiled. "If you hadn't done what you did, I wouldn't be alive to hate you." Evelyn laughed, and tears slipped down her cheeks, clear as light, not tears of pain, but of forgiveness. They sat in silence, listening to the soft clink of a spoon against porcelain. Outside, the mist was lifting. The first rays of sunlight reached the rooftops. Lucas spoke. I'm studying again, Mom. MBA, but this time not for a title. I really want to understand. He smiled faintly. And I'm starting to love making coffee. People say if you do it right, coffee helps others remember what they love most. Evelyn looked at her son and saw, in his smile, the quiet glow of a man who had fallen and climbed his way back up. Your father would be proud, she said, her voice trembling. And you? He asked softly. She took his hand. I am, too. But more than that, I'm proud you learned to stand on your own. I lost a prince, but found the man he was meant to be. A little while later, the cafe began to fill with customers. Lucas stood and returned to the counter. Evelyn remained at the table, watching her son move between sunlight and steam, his motions steady, his smile serene. A young woman called out, Lucas, my cappuccino's perfect today. He grinned. That's because today's special. Evelyn's heart trembled at those words. She didn't ask why today. She already knew today, exactly 1 year after the night everything ended, was the day her son truly came back to life. When he brought her final cup, she looked down at the foamy heart drawn in milk, sunlight gleaming off the bronze surface like melted gold. Where'd you learn to pour it like that? She asked. He smiled. My teacher said, to make something beautiful, you have to build a strong base first. Like life, Mom. She laughed, tears falling again. Outside, the mountain wind carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. Evelyn took a sip, hot, bitter, but soft and sweet at the end like life itself. She lifted her eyes to him and whispered, Thank you for coming back to the world. Lucas smiled. No, Mom. Thank you for letting me lose everything. When they stepped outside, the sun had risen high, pouring through the fading mist and across the cobblestone street. Evelyn stopped to breathe the scent of coffee, wood and mountain air blending into one. Inside her, the storm had finally passed. No anger, no guilt. Only love pure, unbound by money or power. She turned to Lucas, gently taking his hand. You know, she said softly, one phone call ended everything. But it also brought us here. Lucas nodded, his smile glowing in the morning light. Together, they walked down the narrow street, surrounded by golden sunshine and birdsong. The dawn poured across Evelyn's silver hair, and in that moment, every wound, every ruin, every tear of the past year dissolved. All that remained were two people, two hearts that had learned to love the right way, and a new morning beginning. After everything, what does true victory mean? Comment 7 if you believe victory is when your rival falls. Comment 8 if you believe victory is when your heart is finally at peace.